The world's insanity just keeps on getting worse and worse and worse, shall we say. I'm just back from vacation. It was really nice, really relaxed. I was in the mountains in a beautiful forest and surrounded by hills, away from social media, away from all the lunacy that seems to be going on. I get back, I just happened to browse on social media, and immediately I could feel my mood coming down. And then I happened to just click on YouTube, and I saw this friend supporter, fellow we support, Jordan Peterson, in a conversation with his daughter Michaela about some serious things that are going on. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to play a sampling of that clip momentarily. As you can see, I've donned the proper attire for these shows because I feel that it is right and proper to do so. In a world where everything seems to be permissible now, it's I don't know. It gives me great comfort in some ways to go back to the old traditions in many ways. And so if you don't know what I'm talking about here, well, here in the UK, we've been likened to one of the most woke cultures on the face of the planet. My very being here and speaking aloud on this matter could actually end up getting me arrested. So if you know where I disappeared to, and I suddenly disappear, well, you know where I've gone. This, of course, is unscripted, as you probably guessed. And yeah, it's a reaction to a lot of the stuff that's going on. Here in the UK, we've been likened to Canada, quite frankly. And if any of you know your sort of present, modern Canadian history, you will know that Canada is probably the most woke culture out there. But more so than that, they're forcing a certain professor to be re-educated. Basically, Jordan Peterson, as he'll talk about momentarily, was forced and had his plea bargain, shall we say, turned down because they deemed in terms of the law enforcement in Canada, that Jordan Peterson needs to be re-educated. This is happening over here in the United Kingdom, that a group of rioters, one who charged a police officer, has been arrested and given 5 years for charging a police officer. Well, hundreds and hundreds of criminals, probably sex offenders, pedophiles as well, have been released 6 months to a year early to try and make room for these rioters. There is an agenda that's going on here, folks, and I'm not entirely certain what it is. Perhaps you've got an idea of what this agenda is. I keep hearing multiple different things, such as, it's the Great Reset that's coming, that the economy will drop to such a low percentage that, we'll wake up one day and there'll be a great reset and stuff that's going on. On the other side, I hear, well, they're trying to stop people from breeding. And we're going to talk about that in another video, because I was studying the history of medicine this week, and particularly in this lecture, the Tuskegee syphilis scandal that happened in 1922 all the way to 1972. And why is this really important? Well, because the US government targeted a black community that was largely poor, that was largely illiterate, that was suffering with syphilis in Alabama, and basically they made them guinea pigs. 600 men were guinea pigs in this testing. Now, it had no scientific value at all, and it was completely unethical and immoral. Now, why would I specifically say that it's unethical? Well, as a psychologist in training, one of the things that you learn whenever doing experiments on the general public or on one patient or client, as we call them now, is that it has to be informed consent. Now, informed consent means that the people or persons that you are performing your experiment on know fully and clearly understand what it is that you're doing. They understand what benefit it is to them, to science, to humanity in general. Well, how could someone who was illiterate, that was poor, that really didn't have a grasp and could speak, well enough, but not anything intellectually, how could they give informed consent? And a lot of people say, well, that was terrible, that was terrible, that was just absolutely horrific. Correct. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, how could a 3-year-old or an 18-month-old or even a teenager that has severe mental health issues, how could they give informed consent as to what to do with the barbarity and butchery of their bodies? Now, you may say, well, what has this got to do with anything that you're talking about? Because these are the very things that people are being arrested for in Canada, in the United Kingdom, because it labels under the act of hate speech, and also in France as well. if you were to say anything about COVID, for example, you could be arrested. Could be arrested here in the UK. With that in mind, I want to play a clip from Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson's interview this past week. It's just going to be a 6-minute thing because on StreamYard we're very limited, but it'll give you a brief overview as to what's going on here, and then I'll see you in the end. So enjoy.
Yeah, so a brief overview. You've been being investigated by the Board of Psychologists in Ontario for the last, how many years has it been? At least 2, 4? A long time.
Off and on since 2016, more on than off, but very intensely for the last at least 3 years.
Yeah, so this investigation is caused by people around the world filing complaints against comments you've made on social media about the government, trans issues, and things you said on Joe Rogan. So you appealed, I think the last time we did an update, you were appealing to the Supreme Court of Canada to see if you could avoid the mandated re-education that the College of Psychologists wants you to do. And for everybody who doesn't know, that re-education means they're assigning someone they choose to train you on what to say on social media, which I find
more
hilarious.
Than that, even I would say more than that. They want to retrain me with regard to how I conduct myself as a public intellectual, let's say. And
Yes.
so, and that retraining is, of course, at my expense with their deemed expert. They have someone who styles herself, I believe, a social media expert, whatever the hell that is. And apparently they believe that her intercession in my affairs will bring me to heel. That's the plan. And so they've already sentenced me to that. We appealed that through the Court of Appeal first in Canada, and now at the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court announced today that they rejected my appeal and they want me to pay court costs for the College of Psychologists. A college is a board that licenses people professionally after they've completed their education, just so everyone knows, and you have to stay in good standing with the college. There's a membership fee generally, and the colleges in principle were there to ensure that the public was well served by people with professional designation, but they've become radically politicized, just like everything else in recent years. And the college obviously has members who are none too pleased with me for being right about things. And now it's time to be re-educated. And just so people know what have been the accusations. Well, they take 3 forms. You alluded to them. I've been very vociferous in my objection to the butchery of children that goes, and their sterilization, which I regard as a crime against humanity, by the way, and which my fellow colleagues on the psychological, psychiatric, and medical front have proved themselves none too courageous in opposing, shall we put it that way. And I'm perfectly happy about what I've said on all those fronts, because I regard what's happening with regards to so-called gender-affirming care as the worst professional scandal, I would say, since World War II. It's absolutely appalling on all sides. And it's certainly the case that since I made the comments that were objected to by the various complainants, none of whom, by the way, were clients of mine or even new clients of mine, since I've made those comments, most European countries have radically backed off with regards to their support for gender-affirming surgery after it's been revealed that everything about it is a lie and a scam. And far worse than that. That just, what would you say, brushes the surface. And then I criticized Justin Trudeau, which is something I'm actually pretty happy about, because he's, he's an incompetent narcissist who's made Canada a much worse place, and he's certainly not done with that yet. I criticized some of the members of his staff, and I made some comments about climate on the Joe Rogan podcast, not the last one, but the one before that, and someone submitted the whole bloody transcript of that to the college and said that, I don't know, what am I doing? I'm doing something unethical by pointing out the fact that the climate scam is a preposterous pack of lies generated by people whose fundamental aim is nothing but power and control. And I'm also pretty happy about that. And I would also point out that since I did that, and I'm not attributing this to me, it's part of the whole process by which these things unfold, the climate apocalypse narrative is looking increasingly shaky. Let's put it that way. The net zero proposals look economically preposterous and devastating. Germany is deindustrializing to its own detriment. The whole green scam is going to disappear. And I happen to be on the forefront of opposition to that, and I'm also perfectly happy about that. So it isn't obvious to me at all how this re-education is going to go. So, as I said, I've already been sentenced to that. So
Yeah.
I'll be sitting down with an expert, whatever that means, and they're going to do whatever it is they think they can do to make me into an entirely different sort of creature than I am. And so I'm sort of morbidly curious about that. So, like, who are they going to get to do this? How are they going to proceed? How are they going to make it very difficult for me to undertake that? Because that'll certainly be one of the tricks. So that's the situation. On to the re-education camp. And I'm going to comply with it, because I could tell them to go to hell. I'm not that thrilled about being a member of their club anyways, because I'm pretty sickened by the disgraceful conduct of my fellow psychologists in their absolute cowardice in failing to oppose this abysmal treatment of young people. So I guess my next step is to contact the college and tell them, on with the show. So I don't even exactly know how to do that, but I guess we figure that out, or maybe they'll be in contact with me. And then we have to negotiate exactly what that'll look like. And I have no idea what that'll look like.
So at this point, Michaela expresses to Jordan just, I think, more her fears, that the fact that, when someone opposes something, historically speaking, and opposes the narrative, people can be done away with very quickly. And she genuinely fears that Jordan could be arrested. Now, that would be too obvious. So, again, if Jordan just suddenly disappears, that people are like, okay, he just disappeared. Well, he's probably been arrested. He's probably been done away with, like mafia style kind of thing. But the point that I was making to a dear friend of mine, actually, who's watching the show at this point this week, is what about if Jordan goes in, he's arrested, and as Jordan also said, they perform medical experiments in World War II. Well, if you know your history, they actually performed certain medical experiments during the Victorian era, during the French Revolution as well, when they wanted to change people, deal with people. Like they bring people in off the streets during the Victorian era and literally perform a brain realignment procedure upon them, which involved taking a very large instrument that looks like the kind of meat tenderizer that you would have in your cupboards and smacking someone round about there in the frontal lobe. This is why studying history, psychology, and all the other things that I do is so important. So Jordan makes that point. And so Michaela is genuinely terrified that her dad may go to prison. Well, that's one way of getting rid of people. Now, as we're going to cover in a future episode, Nigel Farage had this same issue over here with Prime Minister Starmer. And a big part of that was because Starmer turned around and said to the great media public that literally Nigel Farage was nothing more than an extreme right-winged lunatic, I paraphrase here, who is causing a number of the riots and causing a number of this, that, and the other. And he, quite frankly, he hasn't been. The reason the rioting is going on over here in the United Kingdom, especially in England, is because people have had enough. They've had enough of being lied to. They've had enough of people oppressing them and subjecting them to absolute nonsense and heresy in many ways. They've the fact that the country has really lost its ways as a country. Britain was envied the world over because of our civilization, because of our tea, because of the way we conducted ourselves on whole and en masse. And that seems to be lost more and more and more as we are trying to, well, we're not, they are trying to play people pleaser. And even uttering those words out of my mouth is a very sad and dangerous thing, because Wayne Dyer, one of my favorite teachers, always used to say, there is no us and them. There should not be right and left. And that's the point that I've got jotted down here, is so many people will go to the extreme left or the extreme right, and very few people that ever come to office, both in the UK or the US or anywhere, in fact, opt for extreme balance and extreme middleism, where they're looking at both things from both points of view and they're saying, right, what actually makes sense here? And we invite you to comment in the time, obviously, that we've got here. We've got some random comments about, I wish Trump had training about what to write on social media. I don't know how that pertains to this particular show, but thank you very much for putting that one in there. But literally, what we've got over here, I firmly believe that we are one major riot away from a full left and right war. And I firmly believe that that's honestly what whoever is behind this, whoever's writing the narrative, that's what they want. I don't know whether social media reporting on everything and we see everything now. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know if it's fueling the fire or just informing us and concerning us as to what's actually going on. What do you think? Do you think that social media sharing as much as what they are about, the police essentially and their double standards in terms of any form of LGBTQI woke culture opposition, do you think that's anything that we've got to be concerned about? Do you think that's something that, it's better to know the enemy you face or better not to, in terms of words, dare I say, that I shudder even to speak aloud, because in a round planet there should be no us and them. There should be no taking up sides, and I think it's very, very important that we, as Stephen Fry said, we look at how we treat people more than anything else. Whether you're an extreme rightist or extreme leftist, it comes down to how you treat people. If somebody's going through a transgender procedure, it could be that they have severe mental health issues. It could be that they have gender dysphoria, genuine gender dysphoria. It could be that they, there's all manner of things going on, and we can walk through that. We have done in other episodes of the Mind, Body, and Soul show. I just think it's really sad of what is going on here. And my concern, as I brought up many, many times and many shows and many different conversations I've had recently, is how people with a lot of money and with a lot of desire to advance science are exploiting people with clear mental health issues. And every single person that I've worked with that is going through the transgender procedure all has had severe mental health issues. That does not blanket for every single person on the planet. It can't do, because there is no blueprint for every single person. But that is, I'm looking for the mitigating factors. I'm looking for the anomalies. What's going on here? How did something that started out as so small become so big? Well, it became so big because it was funded so big. And you've got people like myself, Ben Shapiro, Piers Morgan, Jordan Peterson, obviously, that are deeply concerned for the people that are going through this, because you are being exploited in the same way that the church often exploited the drug users to get them into the seats, the same way that the lunatic scientists of the 1800s and 1700s, but more so the 1800s, would exploit the poor because they were easy prey. In the 1700s in Paris, France, if you could have your leg lopped off, you would make more money if you're on the streets. The only problem was you'd be doing the surgery with a rusty blade, and people didn't often survive it. And I don't think there's anything different now. I think literally just the way that they perform these sort of experiments has changed. We're going to go to some of the comments now and see what folks are sharing and what thinking. I think it helps to fuel the fire. This is referring to, obviously, the social media comment. I think it helps fuel the fire. We were built to have to care about every little thing. We were built to have to care about every little thing. I think I know what you mean. But yeah, I don't know that we weren't built to have to care about every little thing. I think that's what this Epic Wolf 3 means, and I think I know exactly who this person is. But I think it's true. I think nowadays, and I brought up this point just before we went away on vacation, that the reason for the riots primarily is not just because people feel oppressed, people feel hard done by, people are sick and tired of seeing people grow and and flaunt it in front of everybody else while other people struggle. I think it's genuinely because people are absolutely exhausted and sick and tired of the latest movement, the next thing going on. As Jordan Peterson said, the whole idea about the climate change. Now, again, something that I've studied at length, and to sum it up, folks, without going into a whole load of detail about this, climate change is a natural evolutionary process. Now, I'm not talking about Darwinism. But it literally happens every 100 years. You know, the world's weather changes somewhat because the world, the galaxy, the universe is changing. And you would be a fool not to see that. I'm not saying that, you know, carbon emissions and chemicals and everything else haven't contributed in some way from the 1800s to present day, but you're talking about, you know, 150 years worth of stuff, which in the grand scheme of things, you know, I don't know is enough to make the major impact that what we're seeing now. I think literally this is a natural global shift that has been added to by human beings potentially. I don't know. You share your thoughts. I'm intrigued for sure. Some other people that are watching this may have also studied this at length and may be able to add some form of view on there as well. Okay, let's take a look at questions. Social media also quiets those who walk more in the middle on the issues, makes it hard to have a conversation from other perspective. I absolutely agree. So when you understand about social media and what it actually is built and programmed to do, you understand that people respond more to negativity than they do to positivity. So, for example, when I put out our last live stream, which was entitled "It's Over, Britain Has Fallen," we got hundreds and hundreds of views while we were actually doing the live stream because people are more intrigued by the negative stuff than they are the positive stuff. And social media actually fuels that. So if I sit here and tell you how to conduct yourself, you know, how to meditate, how to mind, body, and soul, and how to regulate yourself, how to look after yourself, yeah, that doesn't make for great viewing because people oftentimes sit there, watch it, and like, yeah, okay. But they're more happy to sit there and watch, you know, two people fighting in a WWE ring or a UFC ring or the Octagon or wherever. And that's what tends to get the attention on the masses. People click out of morbid curiosity. As Jordan Peterson said, you know, he's morbidly curious about what they're going to do to him in this world. Now, to wrap up, because I've got another meeting to jump to, but I felt it was really important, obviously, to jump on here and to talk about this. Why is this so important with regards to one guy out in Canada being re-educated? Why should we care? Because here's the thing. If they can do this to Jordan Peterson, they can do this to anybody. Jordan Peterson has got a massive following of nearly, I think, 9 million followers on YouTube. And with every video that he puts out, he normally gets 1 million+ views on YouTube. Why is that important? Because if he just disappears, if they re-educate him as one of the strongest voices that's speaking sense with regards to the woke culture, and I'm not blaming the kids. I'm not blaming the kids in the slightest. I'm fully holding people at blame who are the scientists behind the butchery, who are the brainwashers, the subliminal messages behind the butchery, behind, you know, people literally not able to stand each other anymore. There is someone somewhere or a group of people somewhere that are funding this heavily. And we know it. We can probably work out who they are. It's just coming down to enough people have to wake up. And as human beings, especially here in the UK, they do the same thing that the government do, which is they only act when something gets serious enough or something gets heinous enough, like children being killed, like being butchered, like sick, horrendous stuff going on, like drag queens going into schools and teaching their young children how to masturbate at 5 years old and how to touch other boys and girls and deeming that it's okay to do that. What planet is that? I mean, I can't even fathom. I was born in the 80s, okay? I'm not an old fossil. But what I cannot even fathom how we got from, you know, time of running a nice little youth group, as I did, the largest youth group actually, to the insanity where we are now and dealing with the issues that we're at now. I don't even think, even as a historian, that when the trains came by, when industry came by, when political movements, women speaking, women having the vote, the vote for the working man, I don't even think the powers that be at that point were sitting there saying, this is the greatest threat that ever stands with us. And there's times, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, where you've listened to some of the votes and you've listened to some of the positions that the average person has taken, and you're like, was it such a good vote? Was it such a good idea that everybody could vote? Because the problem is, as we've seen on social media, and people that far more qualified than I am have said, the danger that we are in now is people's opinions are being treated as fact. And that's why I've always said, Rumi said this himself, never teach on something you don't have firsthand experience. And Dr. June Campbell had said this himself, that again, everything that he says is backed up by fact, backed up by evidence and research. And that's the psychologists. That's what we're trained to do. Is I could make a wild accusationary claim like, Jesus was whatever. But if I can't back it up with some physical, tangible evidence, it means nothing. Okay, I'm getting in a rant here. Used to call it global cooling before. Now that's okay. So again, great point there. Epic Wolf 3, again, 1800s. They were in the what I would call the off season of the last great ice age. So 1860s, even probably before there. I forget the exact dates, so forgive me for that. I can obviously find it out and put the link up later on. But literally, there was an ice age. 1888, it was the wettest spring, summer, autumn on record to that point. It is not something that is completely alien to us. We're seeing more and more catastrophic storms around the world. Well, if you go back to 1827 and the tri-state tornado, that was pretty severe. Again, I think people are seeing it more. Don't get me wrong, that I know of, I don't think you ever had a 2-mile wide tornado like what we saw back in 2015, 16, 17. I forget when it was, that killed the meteorologists. Someone will be able to put that up, I'm sure. They used to call it global cooling, then warming, and now exactly. I mean, Stephen Fry made a great point about this recently. And I liken that comment that was just put up by Epic Wolf 3 to the Church of England, because every decade, so it seems, you have a change in the narrative. So you look at homosexuality, for example, in the 50s and 60s, you would have been beaten severely for being a homosexual and to be found out. I mean, before that, you would have been imprisoned. You were an outcast, you were an offcast, you were disgusted and disgraced and everything. Please don't clip that, okay? That's in the past. Now, it's widely accepted. Homosexual marriage, I don't call it marriage first because it does not agree with my my beliefs and my principles and stuff. But that's up to other people. Why, if you're again, as far as I'm concerned, going against the word of God, why on earth would you want to have God's blessing or the church's blessing? And the fact that the church cows down to this and bows down to this, is a real shame. Now, I'm not saying then that you attack these people and you make it us and them and all that kind of other BS. That's the other extreme that's there. But what I'm saying is, if you believe and you claim to believe what the Bible says, what it says right here, right in front of me, what other religious scripts and texts, and again, as we talked about in the last video, when you look at it from a biological point of view, look at it from a psychological point of view, you look at it from an evolutionary point of view, you look at it from a biblical point of view, what good does all of this serve, to humanity? That's really where I come from on this point. Now, I'm very much aware as well that the world is completely screwed up, in many ways possible. I'm not going to get into that now because we've already covered that. But I do like this point that was made as well. Follow the money for who's pushing the re-education and these other things. Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, like we said previously, when the transgender thing very first came out, it was by a Dr. Cash. There was a documentary that was done on it that you'll be able to find on social media. And I do believe it was Jordan Peterson that was also talking about this. But it was done by a Dr. Cash down somewhere in Southern America. And he was known all over the world and, for performing these surgeries. And the problem was that it was the parents of the child who decided, oh, well, this little boy is actually a little girl and this little girl is actually a little boy. And years later, the kids ended up committing suicide. He was arrested. The doctor was arrested. And, it was like, again, it was a scientific experiment. It was heavily funded. And now, again, that it's heavily funded, it has become the beans, essentially, of the world's media. It is literally, you cannot move, for you can't move for views and opinions with regards to the woke culture. And if you're an extreme leftist, you're in the right. If you're an extreme rightist, you're in the wrong. That's the narrative that's being pushed here in the West. And I just think it's so sad. And I implore people to wake up and to recognize you're being played here. The answer may be to switch off the media because it is all one-sided. You know, if it isn't about political stuff, if it isn't about this and it isn't about that, then it's about how you can be played. It's about, you know, how you can have your gender reaffirmed. You can do this, you can do that. The narrative is going to be whatever's globally accepted or whatever's nationally accepted. And the problem is not enough people, I think, are informed enough where they're actually able to make good informed decisions with a basis of a moral basis, whether or not that's the Bible, whether or not that's spirituality, whether or not that's... People just base it now on how they feel. And that's a very dangerous thing, for sure. But at that point, we gotta close. I know this has been a little bit all over the place. I'm sort of out of practice after being away on vacation, but thank you so much for bearing with me and having fun and still asking questions. And thank you so much for your interaction. Really appreciate it. For those that are going to watch this on the catch-up, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends, because this could be the very thing they need to hear in their hour of struggle, in their hour of difficulty. And if you are struggling with your mental health during this time, do get in touch with us. The link is in the description section below. We can help. We have got spaces. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. Take care. God bless. Keep safe. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.